welcome to the Tower Coffee Hour, your news channel for the Miller neighborhood in Austin, Texas. I am Preston, or Ty Tyree, your host for this episode, where we had a chance to attend discussion of transit in Austin that was convened by our State Senator Sarah Eckhardt. She put together a great panel with Brittney Rodriguez of the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber, Jose Chito Vela, City Council member and member of the Board of Cap Metro, Bill McCamley, Executive Director of Transit Forward, and Lonny Stern, Executive Director of Movability. We had a very nice venue at a presentation hall in the ACC Highland Campus right on the Red Line Parkway, and some interesting people were in the audience. This was an interesting juxtaposition with the talk on Monday by Megan Kimble about highways. So, here is Senator Eckhardt and her distinguished panel of experts, doing it right.
But we're also seeing a quickening of the population increase in our surrounding areas. So just to put that in context, where City of Austin between 2010 and 2020 grew 21%. That's a lot, a whopping 21% in 10 years. Travis County, outside the city limits of Austin, grew 25%. Bastrop County grew 31%. Williamson County grew 44%. And Hayes County grew 53% in just 10 years. Now those are percentages and not raw numbers. The raw number for the city of Austin's 21% is going to be larger than the raw number of Hayes County's 53%. But nevertheless, it shows a trend that growth as a percentage of population is actually slowing some inside the city limits of Austin and quickening outside of it in the 5-county MSA. We're seeing that trend across the nation, in fact, where the urban core does not have high-capacity public transit. If you have high-capacity public transit, as many of our older cities do, those cities are retaining population and attracting economic development and business growth and attracting employees to live in the same area where their employment is. But where we don't have high-capacity public transit, employers locate on the cheaper dirt further outside of the municipality and leave it to their employees to scramble for affordable housing wherever they can get it and then drive in a single occupant vehicle to their employment. So we have this amazing panel here to discuss Project Connect and high capacity transit in general. And so I'm going to start us off by introducing them and asking them to illuminate for us in a specific question how affordability, economic development, and climate resilience are all helped by high-capacity public transit. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit. I'm going to start with Bill.
Oh, God.
So the question, though, that I'm going to ask all of y'all in some form, just to get y'all ready, is let's all think about this. Let's all have this thought exercise. It's 2050. It's 26 years from now, and we never did Project Connect. We're still reliant on single occupant vehicles, and we are double in population that we currently have. At least double in population in our surrounding areas as well. And what does that look like for us? So just think about that. What is Austin and the surrounding area going to look like 25 years from now with at least twice as many people and still reliant on single occupant vehicle to connect us. So Bill is the executive director of Transit Forward, an Austin 501c3 whose mission is to educate and engage Austin and our surrounding area with a focus on Project Connect. Engage on transit and affordability. Bill spent 20 plus years being a public servant in so many different capacities. In New Mexico as a county commissioner and a state representative, also as the secretary of the New Mexico Workforce Solutions Board, which is the state labor department. Bill is smarty pants. He's got a bachelor's degree from New Mexico State University in government, as well as a master's in public policy from the Harvard, from the JFK, the Kennedy School of Government. We'll just say that. And I'm going to put a first and elementary question to you, Bill. What's the difference between, this is sort of like which came first, the chicken or the egg. What's the difference between Project Connect, Capital Metro, Austin Transit Partnership, and Transit Forward? Because we're all confused.
That's it. Whoa.
Ladies and gentlemen, okay.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, thank you all very much for coming. This is a really critical topic that is absolutely going to help define how the city of Austin grows in the future, right? Let me just begin by addressing your first three questions: affordability, climate change, business development, right? From an affordability perspective, the American Public Transit Association estimates that if a family can give up a car, if they can give up a car with affordable housing and public transit as a substitute, they can save up to $10,000 a year from their budget. There is not a more concrete affordability strategy that we can do here in Austin than give people these options, right? And affordability is by far the overall #1 public policy topic in Austin today. We know that the cost of living has been going up. It is on people's minds all the time. Transit addresses that. Number 2 is climate change. Transit Forward had a graduate student from UT about a year and a half ago do a really good paper for us on climate emissions and transit. And what she found was this: the 2 biggest areas of greenhouse gas emissions, not just here in Austin, but across the country, but here in Austin as well, are housing and transit, period. So unless we have more transit going to more dense housing where people can live around that, we will not have a chance of meeting our greenhouse gas reduction targets here in Austin. And it's funny, we did a poll last year talking about Project Connect and asking people why they support it. Number 1 was affordability, number 2 was climate change. I thought it was going to be traffic, but I think with, what was it last year, 45 days in a row, over 105, ice storms, Lake Travis is still not back even where they were last year. All those things, people are really seeing this, right? But then from a job creation perspective, as you said, I used to be the New Mexico Secretary of Labor. And one of the reasons I was so excited to get this job when I moved here to Austin was you learn when you're in that position, people need 3 things to be able to work. They gotta have an affordable house somewhere near where they're gonna be. They gotta be able to get to their job, gotta have childcare. And when this job, I can really talk about those first 2 things, and I'm being a volunteer on the childcare thing as well. To answer your other question, what are all the different people doing whatever? The city of Austin is in charge of all the general stuff around transit, right? How are the utilities around transit corridors working? How are the bike lanes? Councilmember Vela was talking about this earlier. How do the bike lanes and the sidewalks interact with the bus stops and the train stations? All of the long-term planning, right? Capital Metro right now is in charge of running the bus service, the train service on the Red Line, the pickup service, all those things going on around town too, right? And so they're gonna be in charge of implementing everything and organizing everything, and they're in charge of the bus and pickup service parts of Project Connect, as well as improvements to the Red Line. The Austin Transit Partnership is what we used to call a joint powers agreement between the city and Capital Metro. And why were they created? Why do you create another organization to make these sorts of things? Best practices across the country show, without a doubt, that when transit agencies try to build these big infrastructure projects, like the light rail portion of Project Connect, they generally don't have the capacity or the bandwidth. They're busy running the buses. They're busy running the trains. The Eno Center for Transportation Policy in New York actually put out a best practices paper a couple of years ago, and the #1 thing they had on there was setting up something like ATP, right? So they were set up to really specifically drill down on the light rail portion of Project Connect. Transit Forward is a separate 501c3. We don't take dollars from the city. We don't take dollars from Cap Metro or ATP. We are a neutral organization, which we have 3 legs of our stool in terms of our responsibility: education, engagement, and accountability. And so I'm really happy to be here today to help do with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Next, I'm going to go to Brittney Rodriguez. Thank you so much for being here. Brittney serves as the Chief Operating Officer for the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, overseeing chamber operations, developing communication strategies and programming, and sharing in successful vision and practices as the leading business resource and advocate for Latinos across Central Texas. In addition to her service with Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, she serves as the President and CEO of Grit and Pearl Public Relations, a Latina-owned full-service public relations and communications firm. And Brittney also proudly serves as the board chair for the Texas Girls School, a board member with Transit Forward, CASA of Travis County, and the Friends of Texas A&M University Libraries, and an advisory council member of the United Way, Cap Metro, the City of Georgetown. Austin Transit Partnership, Williamson County. I mean, I don't know where you're finding all this time. But let me ask you a question about Austin in 2050 that dovetails off of what Bill was saying. As we think about an Austin in 2050, and we look back, if we haven't built the light rail system known as Project Connect, what will the business community have lost?
Thank you so much, Senator. And, obviously, thank you all for being here today. I think this is a critically important conversation, as Bill said. But I think what you're seeing is with many City of Austin partners and the folks that you see on this panel, you are watching in practice and in principle an overall effort citywide for massive collaboration to ensure that Project Connect can be successful. I think for me, Senator, as I look ahead to 2050, and man, it is a dismal forecast with no work. With no effort to improve the current situation as it stands now, and those who know me well know I'm nothing if not direct. We look at an Austin that is less diverse, that does not play host to a thriving business community. We're already seeing the struggle downtown. Our Downtown Austin Alliance is struggling to ensure that spaces are available and accessible, specifically to small businesses, and specifically to community members and communities that have been here and have contributed to the fabric of the community that we love. So I think we look first at a city where our small businesses and the business community in general as a whole continues to suffer. We know that that is currently happening, and the trend is downward if we don't make some improvements. I think with regard to density, what we understand is that if we build these infrastructure efforts, these transit efforts to support our community, we see a sense of community reestablished, a sense of connection. And again, folks, the name of this project is not a mistake. It was not by chance. It was, of course, conceived in great branding and stratagem. And the reality is this is an effort to proactively connect a community that is greatly disconnected. I think I'm an incredible profile. I'm an executive in the city of Austin, and I can't afford to live here. I just finished building my house in Georgetown because it is where I can live. So I absolutely contribute to the incredible numbers we're seeing transition into Williamson County and beyond. Folks, I have to point that while I am thrilled, obviously, to be a new homeowner, I absolutely understand that in practice, unless I catch that red line 15 minutes from my house in Leander, I am contributing to the insane levels of CO2 emissions that are taking place across I-35 and, of course, in downtown Austin. So I think to that end, to wrap this up, Senator, and make sure I pass it along to my colleagues who have amazing things to impart themselves, we look at a less diverse Austin, an Austin that is not thriving in a business capacity, and unfortunately one that is looking for exhaustive Band-Aids, as we have to date, that simply won't be enough.
Thanks so much, Brittney. Next, I'm going to go to Lonny, but I want to dovetail on what you just said in terms of affordability. I think we all have our own story to tell. I live in my father's house. I'm a longtime Austinite and live in my dad's house, which is close to downtown Austin. I live in my dad's house with 3 other unrelated adults. because there is no way that I could afford that house on my own
As a senator,
as a senator.
right?
I'm a state senator and I'm a lawyer. The only way I could afford to live in the house that was my father's house is by having 3 other unrelated adults living in that house with me, who are great, by the way. I love my housemates.
Wonderful.
Lonny, oh my gosh, Lonny Stern and I have known each other forever. Lonny is the executive director of Movability, which works to advance commuting options that reduce traffic congestion, improve air quality, and enhance the economic vitality of Central Texas. Lonny has worked in a variety of roles, including as a public involvement manager at the Austin Transit Partnership, community engagement administrator for Cap Metro, senior director of the STEM Council at Skill Point Alliance, outreach director at Empower Texans, formerly the Center for Public Policy Priorities, say that 3 times fast, and the communications and outreach director for Hope Street Group. Both Hope Street and CPP, or otherwise known as Empower Texans, are both nonpartisan policy organizations. He's held additional roles at 8 gazillion different things. AGLIF, 91.7 FM Co-op, Project Transitions, a member of Movability's board of directors since 2019, and he earned his master's degree at the LBJ School for Public Affairs at UT Austin, which is where I earned mine as well, and a BA in English and Communications at Florida State. So, Lonny, I'm going to put that threshold question to you, but in a slightly different way. In Austin of 2050, where we have not built Project Connect, and we are still predominantly, if not exclusively, reliant on single occupant vehicle for our connection, how has that affected our air quality and quality of life for Austinites and surrounding Austin area residents?
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for taking time after work to be here tonight to talk about transit and transportation. I know you have choices, so thank you for being here, and hopefully you shared the ride in some way to come here tonight. To answer your question, I've lived here already. I've seen what a 25-year period looks like, and so I know what another 25 years will do. And to your point about diversity, the truth is that if we wind up developing in the way that we have been developing, we have choices when you come to the region. And people are making rational decisions. So they're trying to find a place for their family to live, and they're trying to find a job that is affordable. And so if we don't have the infrastructure to make it possible for more people to live and work in the city, they're going to choose to live and work outside the city because they're chasing affordability. So we're going to wind up with all the wealthy people in the middle and all of the lower income people surrounding on the outside, which is sort of the opposite of what we went through during the white flight years. So we're just going to kick everybody out of the city. That's apparently the policy decision that we have made by prioritizing having single family homes because the land is too expensive in the middle. But we're not taking into account is the technology that we're on the threshold of. So, when we talk about robotic cars, we're looking at Waymo or Cruise, and we're thinking, oh, that's neat. That's an oddity. Maybe you have a feeling about whether or not you'll use it. But what I see happening is that we move into a car club culture. And so maybe now you have a feeling that you need a BMW all the time. But in the future, you might just join a German car club. And some days you need a VW. Some days you need a BMW. And so whatever it is, you'll be part of that club and you'll ask it to come to you. And so maybe it comes to you as a robot and then you decide you want to drive it, or maybe it drives you. You don't know. But what'll happen is you'll have cars everywhere, but half of them are going to be empty and clogging the road. Because we're basing everything on this single occupancy model. Now, if we had a shared model to begin with, maybe some of those cars will have more than one person in it. I could only hope and dream. But how many of you are choosing the shared Uber option at the moment? When so if you're not doing that now, I have a hard time imagining you choosing the shared car model in the future. So not only will we have wealthy people in the middle, less wealthy people surrounding, we're going to have empty cars in a line that we're now waiting on. to get into our city. And unfortunately, we're going to also have buildings with large garages that are half empty, and it makes you wonder what will fill that space. So maybe we'll convert some of that, but I would suggest that some of the urban decay issues that we see around the city will move into those parking garages. And so I'm a little worried that by building our city around the car as we know it becomes obsolete, so will the infrastructure and the way we engage with the city. So I'm a little worried about that. As for air quality, what people may not realize is that it's when we idle that we make the worst air quality decision. And so it's the further out we move, the longer we're in a queue, that is really impacting air quality. And we're seeing that even with our decisions with children. People go to school and they drive their kids to school. They pick their kids back up from school and they wait for a half hour, an hour. People do laundry and fold their laundry waiting for their kids for pickup at school. And it's causing huge spikes in particulate matter, which are easily readable during that rush hour in the afternoon. And I just see that increasing more and more, given the fact that as people move further out, they may also decide that they're not happy with the school that they're at. So they may need to move further away to go to another school. So again, the further out we move, the further our driving distance is, the more we're caught in traffic, the worse our air quality will be as well. So again, the goal is to get more people to live and work and play and shop inside the city so that they have choices, so that not every trip needs to be in a car alone, that some of those trips, it doesn't have to be every trip on the bus, it could be that some of your trips are carpool trips. But if you live so far out of the city that you can't even have a neighbor you can say, hey, come with me to work, then we're going to make this problem worse and worse and worse over time. And again, we're going to exacerbate the have and have not ring around our city.
So I'm going to go to Councilmember Vela. Chito, thank you so much for being here. Councilmember Vela has got his bachelor's in history from UT, and then a master's in public affairs from the LBJ school, and a law degree from UT. I did the same program. Go Longhorns. Before his election to city council, he worked as an immigration and criminal defense lawyer at Walker Gates Vela. Previously served as president of the board of the Workers' Defense Project, a great organization near and dear to my heart. President of the Blanton Elementary PTA, and currently serves, of course, on the Austin City Council. So I'm going to put a similar version of the same question to you, Chito. We're assuming that an Austin of 2050 that didn't do Project Connect, and therefore has seen a slowing of population growth and a loss, frankly, of population to surrounding areas, surrounding counties. What does that do to that loss of population to Cap Metro, the City of Austin, and AISD's ability to continue providing the level of services to future Austinites that current Austinites are currently enjoying?
First of all, thank you so much, Senator, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for coming. That's a really good point because, ultimately, downtown, the huge buildings that are in downtown Austin are the biggest taxpayers. They fund, downtown really kind of funds and subsidizes. I know everybody's paying like, $8,000 in property taxes, $10,000 in property, and their property taxes are very high, but the downtown core is just so critical for funding Central Health, Travis County, ACC, whatever the case, all of our public entities that so meaningfully depend on property taxes to provide high quality services. And if we, especially given property tax caps and different kind of efforts from the legislature over the last years, we really have to invest in our downtown core and have that be the just in the downtown core, but all over the city. So it's hard to imagine a vibrant and successful Austin, Texas in 2050 that does not have a high capacity rail system inside it. And I really appreciate a lot of the comments. I won't reiterate one. I was talking to actually Capital Metro folks today, and we were they're doing a 2035 actually kind of vision planning process. I'm on the board of Capital Metro via the City Council, and one of our number one bus route in Austin, which is 801, which is North Lamar, Guadalupe through downtown, and then South Congress all the way down to the South Congress Transit Center, carries about 12,000 riders per day. That, there might be able to, if we really kind of got double-decker buses and did a few things, you could probably squeeze out maybe 15,000 riders, 18,000 riders out of a bus line, but you hit limits in terms of, you just cannot run that many buses and that many drivers and all those kinds of things like that. A light rail system would be able to carry in the 50,000 riders per day. And so just as a practical matter, just thinking conceptually, you have a small town, you really don't need a transit system, right? It's a smaller town. You get to a more medium-sized town, you do need a transit system, but a light rail system is too expensive. It's just too much to put into the ground, so you use the buses, and the buses are more flexible, and you have a small town, you can do that. At some point, cities just get to that level where it makes so much sense to build a high-quality light rail system, because your buses are just not going to have the capacity, and on an ongoing operating basis, it's cheaper to run steel wheel on steel rail transit that is powered by electricity than it is to buy the fuel for the buses and the tires for the buses and the drivers for all the individual buses. You can have one light rail car that holds 200 people, and then you can click them together and you've got 600 people. I just want to emphasize that at a very practical level. The reason Salt Lake City and Houston and Dallas built light rail isn't because, they're become socialist hellholes. Their transit systems were reaching the upper limits of their capacity, and you have to make the investment to get to that next level, or your city is not going to be able to continue to grow and prosper. Honestly, when I think about it, if you live in a small town, you can have a septic system, and septic systems work just fine. At some point, you need an actual, sewer system and water treatment plant, and that kind of, these are just kind of natural steps. There's a reason that virtually every major city in the world has some kind of, high quality transit system. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not experimenting here. We're really just taking the next natural step as a major American city.
Such a good point. My next question is for Brittney, but I do want to do a shout out to Celia Israel, who's sitting right here, our tax assessor collector. Soon to be. And also very expert in transportation. She ran point on transportation in the Texas House, and we were very, very sorry to not have you running point there now, but very happy to have you running point as our tax assessor collector. So Brittney, on the point that Chito made about this being the next logical step, we're seeing the city of Austin going through some growing pains. We've outgrown our transportation and transit network. We've outgrown our hospital. We've outgrown our airport. And so from the lens of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and from the business angle, what does it mean to take this first step, and what do you expect to be the next steps after this that we'll need to take in order to keep pace, not to keep up with the Joneses, but to keep our quality of life and our economic prosperity?
Thank you, Senator. Great question. And yeah, definitely to piggyback off of many of Chito's really good points, I think it's very important, and this is not new or novel at all, but I think it's very important that we acknowledge we're behind. We have no choice. As the 11th largest city in the nation, the fact that now there are tactical efforts to delay this process chiefly point to a political effort that is expensive for Austin taxpayers, that is not considerate, I think, of Austin taxpayers. Let's be clear, this was a decision, and this was a decision that was at the will of the voters. The folks that are on the road next to you every day, and next to me. And the reality is, it's more uncomfortable, it's longer, the commutes are more trying, the temperature is increasing, and, again, traveling in from Georgetown today, I got caught in 3 different areas where I was idling for a good chunk of time, at least 10 to 15 minutes. So to that end, am I contributing? I am. And I think around that, I think if we look at this process, and I'm sorry, Senator, can you repeat the question one more time? I want to make sure I answered correctly.
Sure. We're seeing growing pains. We're outgrowing things, and specifically Project Connect, the first phase, originally was intended to go out to the airport, for instance. And that needed to be scaled back because of unintended cost increases that I'll ask Bill to elaborate on. But what does it mean from the business community's standpoint that we take this first step and keep going to the next phase and the next phase?
Thank you, Senator. So to that end, folks, we're mobilizing. I can tell you that. From the gentlemen that are next to me on the panel, to practice and principle of what you're seeing with your local chambers of commerce, your advocates for business, small business, corporate business, all kinds of advancement within the community. We're mobilizing and we're coming together. I think speaking from the angle of the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we are so proud to have crafted a coalition alongside the Black, Asian, and LGBT chambers of commerce, understanding that we contribute so much to Austin and what people love about it. If you're coming here, you want to enjoy the breakfast tacos. Well, we make those, right? So come visit us on the east side, the few of us that remain. But I think to that end, we have a charge. We have a charge to work together because I think what we recognize is with a forecast into the future, again, it looks incredibly dire if we do nothing. We've already seen a mass migration of communities of color, and Lonny touched on that. Out of East Austin, it's no longer affordable. We've all heard the gentrification stories, we know what's happening there. But the reality is, folks cannot afford to live in the places that they are developing. And for us, we understand that many of our chief members, as simply as, I'm coming up with a name, Juan Rios, who lives on the east side, that we know gets up at 4 a.m. in the morning to drive out to Georgetown and craft the roadways. He cannot afford to utilize himself as a resident. That's a problem. That's a big problem. He's contributing to the community. And the reality is he will get home long after his children get home. He likely will miss them. He likely missed his opportunity to vote. He likely missed his opportunity to engage with his community in a meaningful way. So what we find is we are distanced from one another. We don't have time to be with one another. We don't have time to engage or invest in our communities. So I think where we stand as a coalition, where we stand in practice and principle is understanding that we are at the precipice of a huge decision, and this could go either way. The reality is we are either at the precipice of enjoying massive improvement to our community that we can be champions and advocates around, or we are going to continue to be in uncomfortable spaces next to each other where frustration is higher, people want to move and are leaving the community, our workforce is being absolutely compromised. And you're right, Senator, we will be doubling year over year as we have been, but the truth is we can't afford to lose our workforce, not with the projects that are underway. So for us, it's about mobilizing, creating a coalition, finding our community, and advancing together around what we know our community wants. It's that simple.
Thank you so much. And Bill, I'm going to put this over to you. We touched on it. So the first phase of Project Connect is smaller than we had thought initially because of price tag. So how do we get to the next phase of stretching the line from Yellow Jacket out to the airport and stretching the line from 38th up to Crestview?
Senator, I want to answer that, but first I want to clarify what Project Connect is, because it's a common misconception in the community that Project Connect is just a light rail line. The light rail is the biggest monetary piece of this, but Project Connect, the beauty of it, the brilliance of it when I moved here and saw what the voters had voted on in 2020 was, is a comprehensive connection system throughout Austin. So what does Project Connect consist of? Yes, you have the light rail in it, and I'll talk about that in a second, specifically when it comes to the airport. It's a big piece of it. And that's important because Councilmember Vela talked about it. Light rail gets a lot of people where they live to where a lot of people work. And the two most dense areas of Austin right now are the drag and the area around Pleasant Valley and Riverside. And that light rail line, the first phase that goes in, gets those two biggest places to downtown, where UT is, City Hall, a bunch of the tech companies, hospitals, et cetera, and so on. That's what light rail is. But Project Connect is not just the light rail. You have Metro Rapid bus systems that are going up and down the east side. We have the folks from Miller here talking about how that Colony Park downtown goes through Miller, that new Metro Rapid bus line that's going to go in, right? Another one starts in Miller, goes all the way down to Dove Springs, connecting that really needed community that has been for so long, not given the resources they need to do well, right? Project Connect dollars are funding new pickup services. Dove Springs, one of the most traditionally underrepresented, under-resourced neighborhoods in town, was the first community to get a Project Connect funded pickup service, which is what Cap Metro runs. It's like a publicly financed Uber. In the 4 or 5 months it's been there, it's now become one of the most popular services. Project Connect funds that, right? Project Connect is funding housing. Yes, we understand, and I know this is an issue for a lot of folks in the community, rightly so, that there are gentrification pressures that happen when you have a rail system, new bus system. Austin was so damn smart. No other community around the country has done this. When I tell people around the country this is what Austin did, they are blown away by how smart this was. They put $300 million of anti-displacement funding into the model for Project Connect. What is that money being used for? Right now it's being used to buy affordable housing and keep it affordable so that and the city owns it, right? So that it can't be knocked down in $1 million condos kind of. Some of those dollars are being put into some of our great local nonprofits, Basta, Goodwill, all sorts of folks that are out there helping with childcare, rental assistance for the folks that live in those transit corridors, right? And the last part is Project Connect actually improved the red line. Look, I'm a proud season ticket holder in Austin FC. I'm a proud member of Los Verdes, the fan supporters group. And I'll tell you, that new stadium kicks ass. And the station with it is amazing. And why is that important? Not just for the Austin FC games. First of all, it gets people off the road, as Lonny talked about, that it might be driving the game. But it's an economic driver. To Britt's point, in Austin, we are in a special time right now. For those of you that don't follow soccer, I'm a big soccer nerd. I'm not going to apologize. It is what it is. The Copa America, which is traditionally the South American Championship, this year is basically every good team from Canada to Chile is playing in the United States. There are 2 stadiums around the country that were chosen for Copa America games that were not NFL stadiums. Orlando, Florida, and right here in Austin, Texas. We got the rail system going there, which people expect, and then we get chosen for that. Next year, Austin was chosen for the MLS All-Star game in the summer. We get a station with mass transit, right? And we get these things. Folks around the world expect these facilities to be in place, so it drives economic development that way. Now let's talk specifically about the airport. Unfortunately, as everybody here knows, inflation happened like crazy during COVID, right? Real estate prices went up, labor prices went up. The cost of all the supplies that we get from around the world went up to an extent that nobody saw. I saw Austin Energy was saying the other day, the price of electric transformers now versus 4 years ago is 3 times the amount for those transformers. That affected all the stuff with transit too. So what did the Austin Transit Partnership in charge of the light rail portion of Project Connect do? They were very open, honest, and transparent with the people. In July of 2022, they said, hey guys, we're not gonna be able to do this. These pressures are happening, and we're not gonna blow smoke in your face. We're not gonna lie to you. We can't do this. So our only 2 options are what? Raise taxes, or go back to the drawing board and figure out how to do this in phases. And they chose option B. And Lonny can talk about specifically the community engagement effort because he was knee-deep in it, that they did one of the best, most comprehensive community engagement efforts I have ever seen between the third week of March 2023 all the way through the first week of May. What did they do? They went and gave a bunch of different options. One of them was to actually have a route to the airport. Now the problem with that is, I used to sit on a House of Representatives Tax and Rev Committee, and I used to tell people all the time, gold coins do not come out of the rear ends of unicorns at the end of rainbows. That is not how money works, right? So you only got X amount of money, what can you do? If you go to the airport, and that last portion from where it ends right now, the first phase to Yellow Jacket to the airport, will cost 3 to 5 times the amount per mile to do than the regular parts that go along the street in other places. What would that mean? It means you couldn't go all the way up to the drag, the place you want to get to, right? Because that's where a lot of people live. You couldn't go to South Congress, get all the way down to St. Andrews, right? All the national data shows that with airports, the local group that uses the airport most are the airport workers. And it is really important. They should be able to have that. And let's be fair. Airport connections are really important for economic development. Britt's compatriots over at the LGBT chamber, a lot of those folks are in the tourist business, and they really want that because they want it easier for people to come in. That is important. But all the public feedback happened and say, hey, let's build this for as many Austinites as we can with the dollars that we have. Now, what ATP did do is say, all right, we're gonna have 2 priority extensions, right? We don't have the money for this yet, but we're gonna plan for this. The first goes to the airport, the second goes up to Crestview Station where the red line is, kind of right north of here. And if they can find money, then they'll work on getting those built. And I know discussions are in place right now to try to find money to the airport and get that connection going. There hasn't been any final result given yet, but that was the decision that got made. But know for the folks out there how important this is, that there's a real effort to try to find those dollars. This is all about serving the most people with the dollars that we have. And Lonny can actually talk about the engagement piece if you want to talk about that, because he was really one of the chief architects of it.
So I want to go to the engagement piece after I ask Chito this question, because I think it's important for us to highlight. The project was skinnied down to stay within the constraints of the amount of money that went to the voters. But what is the percentage of federal dollars that money is pulling down?
That's a great question. So the honest answer to that is to be determined. The feds, we made initial submissions to the feds, and we are going to continue to supplement the information as we get farther along the design and whatnot. But typically the range would be in the 45% to 55% funding federal share. Of course, the difference between 45% and 55% for a multi-billion-dollar project is very, very substantial. So, from the city's perspective, we are trying to do everything we can to look as good as possible to the feds in our application. I think one of those is like public engagement. How is this, the overwhelming vote by the voters, 58% of the voters in the presidential November approved of it. Robust community engagement piece, not only before and kind of after, but again where we had to go back to the drawing board there. It was a really impressive process, and it was great to have so much feedback and engagement from the public on it. And ultimately, I think we ended up at a really good place. And another piece that the city has been working on recently is just the major factor for the success of a high capacity transit line is the amount of housing that surrounds it. The more housing you have around a high quality rail line like that, the more passengers are on it, and that's good for everybody, that's good for everything. And so the city recently has taken a lot of steps to make what we're calling equitable transit-oriented development, ETOD, areas around the proposed line to make it, to help get the housing on the ground, and also to make sure that our application is as solid as it can be when it gets to the feds, because land use around the light rail line is a major component of that. I wanted to touch on one other thing too, because I think that Bill covered the importance of getting to the airport very well, and it is important. And I gotta say, as I think a political matter, our guests that come to the Texas Capitol, frequently would maybe they will back off if we get it over to the airport so they can take it from the airport downtown. But for many reasons, though, economic development reasons included, it is important to get out there. And unlike some cities where it's miles away from the center of town, we're really not that far away from the airport. I mean, you can practically see the airport from the end of the line. And so I do hope we get there. But the part that I wanted to talk about is the importance of getting Crestview. People have this myth that rich people ride light rail. That somehow this is. Let me just tell you that the people that ride transit are working class people. That's true in New York. That's true in Boston. That's true all over the world. The rich typically drive, or nowadays, take rideshare or whatever the case may be. That was true in the past. That's going to be, probably true in the future. So if we can get, if you look at the map, it went off the map, but if we can get to Crestview, my district and that northern portion of Austin, that north central portion of Austin, the Lamar-Runberg area, there are so many transit riders in the farther north you go, from 38th, you get up to Lamar, you keep on going north, you just more and more transit riders. The farther north you go. So the farther north we go, the more we serve the working class population of Austin, the more equitable the transit line becomes. So I just got to make my pitch for getting as far north as we possibly can. And just to give an example, and I think the number one, when you're talking about the top stops in the Capital Metro system, and please, if I'm wrong on this, please correct me, but Republic Square is a major destination for so many people. West Campus is also a major, in UT, major on and off. Lamar and Runberg is just about the third most heavily used transit stop in the city. And if we could get to Lamar and Runberg, if we get past Crestview and to Lamar and Runberg, that would just really help so many people in my district, so many of my constituents. So I just really want to pitch to get as far north as we possibly can.
I want to hear from Lonny as the architect of this tremendous public engagement process. I want to put something in there into the pool of meaning here, though, because I think both of y'all touched on it. With regard to is it 300,000 in displacement funds?
300 million.
300 million in displacement funds. That is so important, and I want to put it in context. It is dwarfed by providing what amounts to a $10,000 benefit to every household that can get rid of a car. That is huge. With 300, I can't do the math in my head, but $10,000 per individual. How many individuals would be helped at $10,000 per with 300 million? Many, but not nearly as many as the numbers of people in inside the city of Austin, in Travis County, in Williamson County, who could come into a park and ride and get onto transit, in Hayes County, who could come into a park and ride and get onto transit. The numbers of people who could reduce the numbers of cars in their household would be tremendous. So, Lonny, tell us some about the public engagement process, because oftentimes when people don't like a project, they complain about the public engagement process and say that it was flawed, and therefore the project wasn't fair. Is there any way you, as probably the one person I would say is the most expert person that I know with regard to public engagement, is there anything you can think of that we could have done more?
Well, I want to pick up on some threads from this conversation that we've been having before we get to outreach. And I think one thing that we need to think about and resist is this tug of war on transit about just always talking about it as a social service, because it's an economic development tool. And we don't talk about the airport like it's a social service. We don't talk about the highway like it's a social service. I mean, we're connecting millions of dollars of development potential. We're talking about connecting people to jobs. When you build a highway, you know what's gonna happen along it. You're gonna get strip malls and single-family homes and schools and all of the infrastructure that goes with it. When you build a rail line, you're going to get apartments and mixed-use development and office buildings. And as our council member said, those buildings generate way more tax revenue than does the other kind of development. So actually, it really pays for itself over time, much more than the highway development does. But nobody asks us to vote for highways, so we never bean count whether the money we're spending on a road or a highway is ultimately worth it. And so I get real nervous about this because we spend so much time justifying why transit is worth it, that we're reaching the right audience of people and that enough people are gonna benefit from the affordability, or is it gonna help our air quality? And we're not wringing our hands about anything related to airplanes or cars or even hospitals or what their impacts are. So I just wanna throw all of that out and just say, we are investing in infrastructure. Our city needs this investment. It's going to allow us to develop much more strongly so that more people can live and work in the city. And that is ultimately what we're trying to do. And the $300 million is making sure that we do it responsibly, so that way the people who live here now get to benefit from the infrastructure, not just the people who are moving here. That's the whole problem with growth, is that it's, there's this perception that it's for these people coming here. No, we want to make sure that the people can come here and live here too. But we want the people who live here to benefit from it as well. And to that point, the outreach was about that. So we knew that there was a problem, and you can't just go on television. You can't just email. You need to go on the bus. You need to go to bus stops. You need to tell people who are waiting at 6 o'clock in the morning. You need to show up late at night for those people. You can't just be, at Republic Square at noon, or at 9 o'clock when you get to work, or at 4:30, so that way you can get off at 5 o'clock and reach the people that you need. You need to make sure that you're getting people who are heading to the early morning hotel shift, or who are getting out on their late night nurse shift, and tell them, here's what we're thinking about. Here are 4 or 5 options. We need to hear from you. Why do we need to hear from you? No, really, if you give us this feedback, this is what happens. And yes, your one opinion doesn't matter as much as if you tell 20 other people and they all give their feedback. And are you part of a church, or are you part of a neighborhood, or is there a group of 10? Are you part of a book club? Can we come to that? We'll talk there. And so that's how we did that outreach, because I'll tell you, every chamber, no offense, will call and say, come talk to us. Every neighborhood group on the community registry will say, come and talk to us. But it's these folks who are too busy to do that, who have kids to pick up and drop off, who need to work more than one job, who are struggling. They don't have time for it, and so you need to go to them. And so the strategy was, how do we go to them, and anybody else who's going to contact us will say yes to you. Come call us, we'll say yes. But how do we find the people who can't get in touch with us? How do we go to them? And so that's what I ultimately stayed to do, because I wound up being at ATP all the way up until we reached that point of explaining that to the public. But the idea was host meetings in public, host meetings for people who want to stream this information, and then for those who won't participate, you go and you find every stop with the highest ons, so places where people are getting on the bus, and you just park yourself there. So we got every person who was at ATP had shifts. Every consultant had shifts. People at Cap Metro had shifts. people who wanted to talk about Project Connect at the City of Austin and come to our office, they had shifts. And so you had to go and participate in the outreach.
Hold on.
So that way you knew that we were reaching those people, and it wasn't just people on TV talking about it and people in the paper.
That's so great. So to that point, I'd like to take some questions from the audience. And Lada, how are we going to do that?
I'll bring the mic to y'all, so if you want to raise your hand.
So questions from the audience? You had a question?
Well, the question, one of the questions was on Project Connect. I'm not that quick. I don't need a mic. It was just at the, it doesn't sound like it's projecting.
There it is.
It is?
There
It
it
is,
is.
we can hear you.
So what did you do with the feedback? You're telling us a good system of organizing, but
Yep.
what did you do with feedback? We got, in my community, it was dismissed, the question. So I was curious about how you collected the feedback and what you did about it.
So for every public meeting, every outreach, every survey, all of the comments were cataloged by answer to question. And so you would have specific requests, and then you would take it by theme. So if somebody was saying they liked option 1, 2, 3, and 4, because when we were at that phase in the project, it was, what was your preference for, did you want to go to the airport? Did you want to go further south? Did you want to go further north, et cetera? And then why? What was the reason you were in favor of it, for or against? And we cataloged all of those reasons for and against, and then we also paid attention to where they lived in relation, as well as other demographic factors. But I will say, just as an aside, something I should bring up in reference to the airport. Maybe I'm a little jaded, but I don't know, how often do you go to the airport versus work?
Well, it's a very good point. I go to the airport maybe 3 times a year.
And so, we were building a system based on ridership, and so I go to work 3 to 5 times a week, and I go to the airport 3 to 5 times a year. And so if you're asking for a loan from the feds, they're going to fund the thing you're going to use the most, not the thing you want to use the most. That's what it comes
Can I
down
add another
to.
example to how this actually works? So part of Transit Forward is the ADAPT Coalition, the Wheelchair Alliance, folks in the disability community. And one of the big topics for the light rail portion of Project Connect was, do we want to build a tunnel underground? Because that was the original proposal, really expensive, and once again, dollars. Put that underground, much shorter system, right? What the folks in the disability community during this process that Lonny helped organize was say, no. Every time we go to New York, every time we go to DC, the elevators are always broken. Keep that light rail on the surface because it's more accessible and equitable for us. And I do know that was some of the feedback that went, just as a specific example, to making that choice to keep it on the surface in addition to the monetary stuff.
And on that same, it's a great question. I think what did they do with the feedback? Another thing that they did with the feedback is they put the priority extensions. And that wasn't, conceptually, that wasn't really one of the options, but there were so many people that in response to the survey that said, this better go to the airport. And who said, this better get to Crestview, that they were like, we're gonna build out as much as we can going toward those 2 destinations, and then we're gonna say that these are the priority extensions. So we kind of take that debate off the table about what are we gonna do if we get more money or something like that. We're already ready. So that was another, and I thought that was a very valuable piece of input in the engagement process.
And just really quickly, Senator, I wanted to follow with that. I'm a consultant myself, aside from my work with the chamber. And let me be clear, folks, the work is far from glamorous. You're yelled at, you have incredibly heated conversations, you are impacting lives beyond what you can imagine. And that's nothing we take lightly. I think one thing that I enjoy about our fine city is that we continue to be a place that is massively generous in our willingness to leave a platform to our community. This is a community that cares deeply about what community members think, how they interact, and how they engage. So to that end, I think, you're looking chiefly at your advocates. These are the folks who are running the organizations that are here to support what you care about most. And I think I speak freely for everyone here when I say, please call us, reach out to us. Your questions, while they may not have been answered to your preference, I think in the first go round, there is still massive receptivity, and there are so many options available. I think, one of the things that my parents taught me best, one of whom is in the audience tonight, very proud, he traversed here on light rail. But one of the things that they taught me early on in my formative years, which have contributed to who I am now, was that you have to look for the helpers. And I think in this case, we understand our charge. The work has never been more. I would love to be on my couch right now. This conversation matters more. And as it does to these gentlemen as well, and of course to our fine senator. I think the reality is we realize we no longer have the luxury of not engaging. This is a long, ongoing conversation, and one we will continue to have for the next 20 to 50 years. So please, keep coming with the feedback. We want to hear it. The fine folks at ATP want to hear it. Cap Metro wants to hear it. These are the partners that are here to support you. So I want to be sure that it's not just considered a one and done. That feedback from the community is something that we expect, we want, and is ever present, and we're receptive to.
Other questions from the audience?
We have one right here.
Okay.
Councilmember, I think this is directed at you because you have a foot in the city stuff and a foot in Cap Metro stuff. And I know you care passionately about what you were talking about, which is how do we get people to live closer in, because it's an equity discussion. The old Home Depot comes to mind, in St. John de Guadalupe. Are there some developments or some reuse? Because I like to look at what used to be a bank and see that they're building vertical, they're building more homes there, but they're not building homes for working class people. I was wondering if there's some developments and partnerships, and give us some good news about what we're looking at as far as future reuse. I think what used to be a school, what used to be an Austin Energy facility, we've got to think creatively about how to nudge that forward. I was wondering if you had some good stories to share about what's happening there.
Yeah.
That includes AIC.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a project, I'm thinking about the old Austin Energy, they call it the laydown yard there on Crestview, just on the other side of the tracks, on the south side of the tracks from Crestview. That is a city-owned piece of land that hopefully will have affordable housing very soon. And again, the site is absolutely excellent in terms of, it currently has excellent access to transit, and down the road, it's going to have potentially even much better access to transit. And the city, generally speaking, when I think about the affordable housing dollars that the city has been awarding, both from kind of Project Connect type monies, but also from affordable housing bonds, the voters of Austin have been very supportive of numerous affordable housing bonds over the last decade. You're seeing an increasing amount of money go toward affordable housing along our transit network, with the idea that you're getting kind of that double bonus effect of not only are you putting below market rate housing there, you're also connecting someone with really a good transit. And then I gotta say, on the ETOD plan that we just put through, the Equitable Transit Oriented Development Plan, all of the housing that is going to be located in that radius, it's going to use the rules of the ETOD, is going to have to provide a percentage of affordable housing. So right there in and of itself, that anyone that builds on the line is going to have to, depending on how high and other factors, 10% to 12% of the units are going to be affordable. In addition to that, we did something, I think, kind of, I don't want to say unique, but new, where if you are going to build and you're going to tear down an existing apartment complex, with the idea being that most of these are going to be affordable, you have to relocate the people that are gonna be there, and they're going to get first dibs on anything that is built there once that apartment is actually up and running. That means that they get, basically kind of cash payouts to help them relocate and have a soft landing. And that's not all great, but the reason that I'm glad that we did that is not that it's gonna, get the tenants, payments to move and all that stuff. It's because that developers that are looking at properties are gonna be like, that, 20-unit apartment complex, let's go to the empty lot, or let's go to the gas station, and so that way we kind of give them a little disincentive to, tear down those old cheap, what we call old cheap beat up apartment complexes called affordable housing in Austin. But, a little bit of a disincentive to move away from those to other types of properties in an effort to not displace people and gentrify people out. So I'm really proud of the efforts that we've been making, and we've got a lot of land too. The city has a lot of land, ASD has a lot of land. There's a lot of other opportunities to put not just affordable housing really, but like deeply affordable housing that can house not just working people. I mean, retirees and on a fixed income, permanently supportive housing for the homeless. A lot of different opportunities down the road.
Other questions? I know that there's one over here, there's a couple in the back. Lotta?
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay. I'm with the city of Manor, and when you're talking about your red line, green line, light rail, was there ever any questions to the surrounding cities? Because Manor is so close to Austin, Austin is encroaching upon Manor, that our numbers are calculated off of Austin's numbers. So when we're sitting there trying to provide affordable housing, we're finding that the numbers aren't quite so affordable. So we're saying it's affordable housing, but it's not really affordable. We have people on our city council that kind of really can't afford to live in our city because the tax rate and everything else is super high because we are that close to Austin. Capital Metro does not give us what we need to effectively bring our people into Austin for the jobs that they have. So everyone is driving, which causes a problem on 290 and 973. So when you're speaking of this light rail, did you ask any of the small cities that are around you that are being directly affected by what you do, how they can be helped? Because we have so many infrastructure issues in Manor because we're so close to Austin that we need to collaborate and get some things moving.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad Manor is here tonight. Bill, you want to take this for a moment? Take it
Lonny,
first.
go ahead.
Lonny?
Yeah, I could probably speak to that.
Go for it, because this is an important question of how will this deep investment inside the city of Austin benefit Manor, Pflugerville, Round Rock, Cedar Park, Leander. Yeah.
Well, so there are a few things to know about first. I guess first I'll speak to this just because I had a front row seat during my time at Cap Metro before the election. And I am familiar with the service in Manor right now. There is a pickup service in Manor, serves the entire city of Manor. So there's a 15-minute service door to door anywhere in the city of Manor. You can go to capmetro.org/pickup to find that service. And there's also the 990 Express service that goes from downtown Manor to downtown Austin. Although that is express, so that's commuter service, which isn't frequent, that's just rush hour service. Now, as for the rail line that would most impact Manor is the Green Line. And there was a study about the Green Line, and I was involved with that, and there are some people who are here in the audience that were also involved with the Green Line. And before it was decided for the election, we did look at the city of Manor because the Green Line does extend through the city of Manor and in fact goes to Elgin. And there was a possibility that those cities could participate since Manor is part of the Cap Metro service area. But ultimately, the election for Project Connect was a City of Austin election. So only citizens of the City of Austin voted on a property tax increase for Project Connect, and therefore the services were limited to within the City of Austin. And so right now, the Green Line as it's planned would end at Colony Park, even though the ultimate plan is for it to continue out to Elgin, though not now. Now I will say with the Green Line study, when we went out to Manor, if you look at downtown Manor, the lots that are there are not bundled. They're all still individually owned single-family lots, which makes it difficult to do something like the equitable transit-oriented development plans, where you can put things together to build larger buildings or even put a bigger station there. So it made it difficult to justify why the city would invest in the rail line if they couldn't get the economic development impact. And that's why Manor ultimately didn't participate at that point. But the city generally, well actually Cap Metro generally has been working on arrangements with other cities outside of the city of Austin. And I don't know, I might leave it to a board member to talk about the TDPs because there are various arrangements with different cities that you're not part of the Cap Metro service area. But before I pass it off, I will say that anybody who lives in Central Texas has the opportunity to park and ride once they get into the city for free, so that way they don't have to park and pay downtown. So whether that's South Park Meadows, whether it's Tech Ridge, Lakeline, even the Triangle has free parking, so that way you don't have to pay to park downtown. You can stop at any point and ride.
I would just say that the Green Line is absolutely on Capital Metro's radar. It's going to take a lot of money to get that line right now, just carry freight, and in order for it to carry people, we really have to put a lot of money into safety improvements on that line, and that's the barrier. It's just that it's such a big chunk, because it's a good ways out there. But absolutely, the Green Line is there, and to throw in a Pflugerville mention, the long-term plan is to get to light rail to Tech Ridge, and then Tech Ridge would ultimately serve as the park and ride for Pflugerville/Williamson County, really, kind of from there. So we are trying to build a line that benefits surrounding communities and helps those folks as well, but we've got to build a middle before we build the parts on the end. I mean, unfortunately, I wish this could all move so much faster, but we got to start in the middle, and the middle is just so difficult to build, and it's so expensive. And we joke about how like the Project Connect is a utility relocation project with some transit thrown in. And so, but I do want to get there. And just one last mention, since we're talking about intersections, we're working, City of Austin and Manor partnered on a bike path that is under construction and soon to be open, so you can basically ride from downtown Austin to downtown Manor on a grade separated paved path. It's not open yet, but I want to say before the end of the year. So again, I know that's not going to be an option for most people, but it's a wonderful thing for our community to have, to be able to bike back and forth between Austin and its neighbor cities.
Senator, if I may, I love this question. First, because I feel you. I totally get it. Let me just say this. I think what you're hearing is not yet, not yet. And I think the reality is we've watched our community absolutely marry itself in the surrounding communities? I love this question because your business community is already mobilizing alongside our partners who are also committed to this massive change. We understand what the forecast looks like and what the growth ahead is. And Laura, I promise I'll be fast with you looking at me. But I will say, one of the things that we're doing is, and I love sharing this with you because there is representation from your Manor City Council, is we have established the Regional Equity and Economic Development Plan that is all-encompassing of the 5-county region, of course, across Central Texas. We have included so many of our partners from those surrounding communities, Judge Gravel out of Williamson County, folks out of your city council, because we need the weigh-in through the partnership that we have with both Kirk Watson, obviously our city council, and also with Judge Andy Brown. There is a commitment to make sure that we are tying these communities together more mindfully. Right now, as I mentioned, we have tried to go back and we're making reparations around the Band-Aids that we've affixed to our community. In this case, what I appreciate about our efforts now is we're bringing in community leaders that are diverse, that speak for every corner of the community to help us understand where we need to be focused and to help us guide and help our partners understand where they're needed most. So to that end, I think the short answer is not yet. To Chito's point, we've got to figure out our own community first. And obviously with the conversation underway, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But it's looking really promising. And so I think for me, there's nothing but optimism. As I look at places like Manor, we know the need is there. We're excited to get out there. There are plans underway. I think from our end, please keep engaging with us. We find that frustration creates a wall. Don't fall for the wall. It doesn't exist. And I'll tell you, anyone here, frankly speaking, would be willing to carve time, a space at their desk to chat with you and to understand why you need what you need, what the issues are, and how we can work together to make this better.
So we're at 7:30, but I think that this conversation is probably going to be ongoing. I think what I drew from this conversation is that this is the beginning, not the end. This current phase is going to be the next iteration, but we're going to continue in conversation to implement this phase and get to the next, and to the next, and to the next, because we need to. We need to embrace a new way to move people and goods through our environment in an economically and environmentally sustainable way, so that we can continue to afford to live here and that it remains vibrant. Let's break for now, because it's 7:30. But some of us, we can hang around a little bit longer, have some one-on-one conversation, and move this to the next step. I will just put a pin in this. I regret that state government is not playing a role.
Oh, they're playing a role.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
They're playing a big role.
Let me change that. I regret that state government is not playing a productive role. Because we really need to have a greater degree of collaboration and partnership at the local, state, and federal level. This is a project that is local and federal. The feds just leapfrogged over the state to go straight to a partnership at the local level that had real legs. And we want to keep that going. We want to keep that good relationship going until we can eventually insert the state in a productive way. Right now, it is not productive. I'll be doing my darndest to make it, to bend it back to productive. So thank you so much for this.
Wow, they did a great job of laying out the promise of transit for a growing city and how it is likely a condition of continued growth and prosperity in Austin. If you like this, make sure that you subscribe down below and click the like button so I'll know what it is that you want to see more of. Great. For the Tower Coffee Hour, this is your host, Preston Tyree.